Wide-eyed Lan edges closer to Japan on tonight's tropical weather bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for August 13th. So around the tropics now, we have Dora entering the Western Pacific. It did some time ago now, and Lan continuing towards Japan. Both category 1s now, much weaker than previous, and on the cusp of receiving another tropical storm, 7E, a depression has formed in the Eastern Pacific, and we expect strengthening. Day 74 of Atlantic hurricane season, and we do have an area of interest that's starting to emerge on the model output, possibly something that affects the Cape Verde Islands and then moves out over the Eastern Atlantic. 10% we're giving it at the time for the time being. We may see that chance rise later on. Day 90 of the Eastern Pacific, there's a 60% chance of a system forming near the Central Pacific. Going to be a real close one to see whether it gets the Hone name or whether it will be Fernanda. And in the easternmost part of the Pacific, that system may steal that name as well, 80% chance. Dora now into the Western Pacific, so it is a typhoon. We also have Typhoon Lan, which is of course getting closer to Japan. We expect landfall there in about 48 hours, maybe a little bit more than that, over the central part of Honshu, probably in Wakayama province or maybe eastern Shikoku. Further towards the west into the Indian Ocean, not much going on here, although there is a lot of monsoonal rainfall over the eastern part of India and over Bangladesh and even up over the Himalayas into Tibet. But no areas of interest for tropical developments. Here's Lan right now. There are gale advisories for Aogashima, Hachiko, Mikurashima and Miyake. It is 314 kilometers from Aogashima, 383 from Hachiko, 593 from Hamamatsu, 668 from Nagoya and 674 from Tokyo. The storm is currently moving northwestwards at a fairly slow pace at around 4 or 5 miles per hour, and it is going to gradually continue in that vein for the next few days. Let's take a look at Dora. It is out there in the wide open ocean, 803 kilometers from Taongi Atoll, which you can see on the bottom left there. It won't go that way. 948 from Wake Island, which it looks clear that now that it's going to miss. 1340 from Midway still. 3582 from Ogasawara, and 4041 kilometers away from Tokyo. Really paints a picture on how large that ocean is out there in the Pacific. It is out there pretty much in the middle of nowhere and is starting a recurvature right now, and it looks like it may go full throttle with that. So let's take a look at satellite imagery then as we get first light over Typhoon Lan, and look at its eye there, extremely large. It seems to be developing into a season of odd storms like this, certainly 2 in a row here that have had extremely large eyes. There is a tiny island there in the northeastern side of the storm, and that is Tokushima, a very sparsely populated island, a very small one, but you can see the storm structure there looking okay, and to be honest, it might hold that structure for quite a bit there now. Will probably arrive ashore as a borderline category 1. Meanwhile, Dora isn't looking so pretty now on this imagery. It is still fairly small, but it has been warped quite a bit to the north there. Wind shear looks like it's really having a go at the storm right now from the south, but it is, of course, as always, has been the whole time fighting back with some decent convection there as well. And here is the new tropical depression 7E, which will probably get a name in the Eastern Pacific fairly soon. The way it's going right now, gradually moving west-northwest, was looking decent, probably on the threshold of reaching tropical storm status already actually, and looking good. It shouldn't be affecting any land areas, and it is expected from the National Hurricane Center to become a hurricane. I would expect that this storm will probably end up being a borderline category 2 when it gets towards its peak intensity in around 3 days. So let's look at the sea surface temperatures. The Eastern Pacific, of course, still very warm off the coast of Mexico, where that system is right now. It's around 28-29 degrees Celsius. It's got a small window, but manageable window for it to develop. The Atlantic, extremely warm still in the Gulf of Mexico, especially further north, well above 30 degrees Celsius now off the coast of Louisiana, extending through the Florida Keys towards the Bahamas and off Cuba. The rest of the Atlantic also looking very warm here. Good conditions for the whole basin as we get closer to peak season. In the Western Pacific, also looking really good. Look at the enormous area of warm waters there. Still the cool pool from Cancun there, but towards Japan, temperatures warm, 29 degrees for land to venture into, and Dora will still enjoy around 29 degrees for, well, actually a little bit lower than that, 27 to 28 degrees for a little bit longer. North Indian Ocean, I think, has cooled a little bit in the Arabian Sea. I'm not seeing any 30s anymore. It's just 29s there off the coast of India and Bangladesh. The Arabian Sea quite cool there. Southwest Indian Ocean, of course, fairly cool into its off-season off the coast of Madagascar, barely holding on to 26 in the north. Off the coast of Australia, also pretty cool as well. Gulf of Carpentaria coastline, some areas dropping below 22 degrees now. And in the South Pacific, also getting fairly cool, almost to its coolest extent that we would expect this winter. Sea surface temperature anomalies, you can see a big cool pool there compared to average where Cancun was, but a warm gap there in the middle of it where Lan is taking advantage. And moving off towards the Eastern Pacific, there's a lot of cool areas there as well, but the easternmost part of the East Pac still looking good. Atlantic also well above average, 2 to 3 degrees in the Gulf of Mexico and also in the main development region. So overall, things still looking very conducive. Oceanic heat content is off the charts in the Caribbean Sea, extending into the Gulf of Mexico. Huge amounts of energy there. If a storm enters that area, it could mean serious trouble. In the Eastern Pacific, a few spots looking good there as well, actually, off the coast of Mexico, so it is fighting on there. And the Western Pacific coming back as well off the coast of the Philippines after those recent typhoons, and the rest of that area up towards Okinawa will also fight back soon. So here's the models right now, the GFS over the next 5 days. You can see all three of these systems developing, and the biggest question marks are over that western one, whether it actually develops first of all, and then whether it develops east of 140 west, or whether it forms in the Central Pacific and gets the name Hone, which I'm sure everyone's excited about. The middle storm, 7E, becomes a hurricane there fully fledged, and then that third system, much largest of the three, becomes a substantial hurricane according to that forecast. Now then, Lan and Dora. There's Lan moving towards Japan still and eventually making that landfall around the 14th or early on the 15th. And Dora turns towards the north, does that recurvature, a full recurvature, remains as a tropical cyclone during all of that, and possibly still a typhoon by the time we get to the end of day 5, which will really put up the question of whether it will get close to the record books in terms of distance travelled. And then potentially another system trying to form south of Japan towards the end of that 5-day period. Looking at the rainfall over the islands over the next 7 days, we expect that substantial rainfall amounts will occur, especially near the coastline of Wakayama and to the east of there, and in eastern Shikoku, and also to its northeast there as well over the western part of Honshu. So we could expect in excess of 14 inches in a few of these spots. That's 350 millimeters. There's 15 inches there, 9 inches towards the northwest. So those are the maximums that we're expecting. Nearly 2 inches there in Tokyo. That's around just 50 millimeters. And even down in Kyushu as well, getting up towards 3 inches there, getting close to 100 millimeters along the east coast of that island. So certainly a few spots there will get heavy falls of rain, which could cause flooding and landslides. Longer range, day 5 to 10, we look at this system in the Atlantic there, fairly weak throughout its duration, but it looks like it could become a tropical cyclone. Low chance given to it at the moment, of course, but we saw that on the GFS. I think there's one other model, can't remember which, that shows something out of this as well. Could even be the Euro model, actually, that goes on to move through the northwestern islands of Cape Verde and then out over the open Atlantic. And now we look over to the Eastern Pacific, where we have the continuation of that severe hurricane by the looks of things there, getting at least a major status, and then continuing to move northwestwards. And actually, look at that, a landfall on the Baja California Peninsula, and the remnants of it moving straight up there through the Gulf of California. So that's an interesting scenario. Still a little way out there yet before we get any solid track data on that. But that's what the GFS is currently gunning for, which I find quite intriguing and a deviation from what it was saying earlier. Another system forming off the back of that as well by the looks of things. Here's the medium range in the Western Pacific. You can see Dora moving off towards the northeast, still holding on to typhoon status way up there in the high latitudes before getting absorbed by another system. And then a sneaky little system there in the East China Sea developing into possibly a typhoon there, not far from Seoul, South Korea, and then moving into North Korea by the looks of things for a potential landfall. A small system there that develops at a high latitude just off the south coast of Kyushu, and then moving westwards, then northwards, and then maybe another enormous system behind that over there in the Western Pacific. So much going on. Scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store. I'd also like to point out that for our 100,000 subscriber special, we are also running a little lottery. If you want to become a member, every dollar of that will go towards a ticket where you could win a very large amount of money. We'll talk about that on another stream. In the silly range then, we've got this Eastern Pacific system, another one that starts to develop there and becomes a substantial hurricane. And then looking at the Atlantic, maybe another system starting to form, could even be off the remnants of that first one we were looking at there, drifting on through as a wave. I don't think it quite is actually. This is a different one, and it starts to move northeastwards there, forming near the Bahamas, and then moving off and possibly getting some strength, but it will certainly be continuing off to the northeast there. Doubt that will happen though, it's a long way out. There's that system moving into North Korea, then an extremely large system in the Western Pacific that will go on to affect Japan, and then a smaller system, much more organized one, forming in the South China Sea, doing a straightforward track there, bending round through Hainan, and then on towards Vietnam, a Typhoon landfall, and then another large system forming behind that might go on to affect Taiwan. So much interesting but odd things that are going on there in the Western Pacific. All kinds of systems, little and large, that are going on there. Whether many of them transpire is another matter. Force 13's Eastern Tour will take place in September. We'll be in Athens, Singapore, Cebu and Hong Kong. Send us a message on any of our platforms if you'd like to get involved with meet and greet during those events. And you can talk about all of tonight's action on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13 for tropical weather and general weather chat, with over 3,500 people out there from around the world. Well, on this day it was 2004 and another hive of activity, but the main feature, of course, no doubt, Hurricane Charlie, which made landfall in the Fort Myers area, I believe, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, as a Category 4, very powerful small storm, which of course was compared to endlessly during Ian last year. We also had Danielle, which had just formed in the Eastern Atlantic, 5L, which would become Earl, Bonnie, which was dying out off the East Coast, Rananim, which was dying off over China, 18W, which was a brief tropical depression near Guam, and Malacus, which had just died off well out to sea in the northeast. Well then, back to today, and the next name in the Atlantic is Emily. In the Eastern Pacific, it looks like we're about to see Fernanda, and in the Central Pacific, of course, the next name on the list remains Hone. Will we see it? Big question there. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Saola. In the North Indian Ocean, it will be Tej. 36 storms so far, and Lan didn't quite get to 3 Category 4s in a row there in the Western Pacific, but it is 3 majors in a row. Australian region, the next name is Jasper. The Southwest Indian Ocean's first name of the season will be Alvaro, and in the South Pacific, next up is Lola. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.